Next, the bonus round gazes into the future of your dollars in video games. Is episodic content the next big thing?
Half-Life, I think, has done that with Half-Life. Episode 1, Episode 2, they started doing it.
That's an expansion pack. I mean, I don't care what they call it. That's an expansion pack.
You're right.
And could we one day buy games by the level instead of by the box?
I think the issue, though, is you have to start off from the beginning designing that game that way. You can't take an existing product and try to retrofit it to this approach.
Find out what our panel thinks next, right here in the bonus round.
Welcome back to the bonus round. Tonight we're talking about your dollars and video games and the impact of microtransactions, game rentals, and the future of downloading games and lots of other options. And to discuss this, I've got Ed Zobrist, the president of Sierra Online, Sean Spector, the co-founder of GameFly, and Michael Pachter, an analyst with Wedbush Morgan Securities. So we've talked about a lot of things here on the bonus round about the state of video games, from the $60 packaged goods to microtransactions, rental. I think some consumers and some gamers are probably worried, ultimately, what does this mean for them and what they're going to have to spend on games. Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of talk about, Sony, at one point they talked about Gran Turismo Online, and they were talking about how you're going to buy, car by car in an iTunes-like store. And I think they thought everyone was going to love it, and then, consumers started saying, well, Gran Turismo, I get, all hundreds of cars for $50, and now, based on what you guys are talking about, is going to cost me $1,000 to get such a complete a game. What do you think is going to happen, Michael? If publishers really push this to that kind of limit, where they're taking things out of a game experience that people were expecting before, and now asking people to pay for them to get the sort of complete picture.
I think Ed addressed this a little earlier. It really comes down to managing the consumer's expectations.
Right.
And so if you're going to charge a full price for a game, then the consumer better get a full game.
Yeah. Right.
He just better get a complete experience. If you're going to sell him something beyond that, then it really ought to be incremental and add some value.
Right.
So I think your example with Gran Turismo is perfect. I mean, you don't buy Gran Turismo to have a 56 Chevy and nothing else to drive around in.
Right.
I mean, you've got to get a bunch of cars. You don't buy Madden football for 8 teams. You want every team.
Yeah.
So if they're going to add something that really adds value to the game that you're accustomed to playing, they can get away with charging you more. If they don't, I don't think you'll see that model evolve.
But you could flip it. I mean, if Sony charged $10 for Gran Turismo, and I got to buy as many cars for that difference between the 10 and the 60 I would normally pay, and maybe I'd spend more.
Well, that's part of the thing I think people are saying, look what iTunes did in the music business, whereas people used to buy a full album, and now you can buy track by track, pick what you want. I mean, do you ever see, an opportunity for something like that? You're sort of doing that with freestyle basketball. Is that it's a lower sort of price entry, and then after that you get to decide sort of what you want. So you could you have a game where you buy it for $5, and then you get to sort of decide in Ghost Recon what gun you want, what you got to look like, and slowly customize it, and then get spend more money that way.
At a low price, of course, that works. I mean, I think back to the cell phone model,
right?
And I know I'm the only guy old enough to have actually done this, but cell phones used to be $30 a month,
right?
And you get like 30 minutes. And if you wanted voicemail, it was another $5.
Yeah.
If you wanted long distance, you paid for that. Every feature added. So I had this $120 phone bill,
right?
And I remember when they first came up with these plans with 500 minutes, for $40, I went, sign me up, great deal. Consumers would rather get the bundle that has everything that they want and know what it's going to cost. They don't want this open-ended, unlimited cost. I think that the freestyle basketball model makes sense because I know for $20 I get a good experience and I can play that thing as long as I want. So again, at whatever price entry point you charge, $5, $10, $20, you better give the consumer $20 worth of value for his $20. Then you can charge more, I think, for everything beyond that.
Ed, some of the consumers, I think, are also worried that publishers now, with the opportunity to do these microtransactions, they may start cutting corners with some of the games and the retail product. Something like Grand Theft Auto 4, they've announced that they're doing these downloadable episodes on Xbox Live. Some consumers, I think, are worried that, well, does that just mean they're going to sort of cut the game back to 90% of what it would have been and then make the last 10% something you have to buy? How do you think publishers are going to be able to overcome that fear that consumers have?
I think that they're going to have to follow through on what Michael's alluding to is by offering up a full game, and the notion that it's a full game needs to be supported through what they read about in the press, the reviews, and what they read about in the forums, that they weren't in fact being shortchanged through the games, and they should be fine.
we talked about the idea of sort of putting a game out piecemeal. Do you ever see a opportunity like a game like a Gears of War or something where people would maybe pay a small price entry $10 and then level by level you sort of pay for the game progressively as you go through? So someone might pay. It's sort of similar to the rental model. It's a small fee up front, but then it's like if you want to keep it out, you're obviously using up your monthly subscription fee to keep the game out. I mean, could that happen?
It's great in theory. I mean, the notion there is that people pay for as much as they want, and we know that a lot of people who buy a GTA don't get to the end. They actually pay for that end, but they never got to the end. So some people paying less for playing through 30% of the game versus someone playing the full game paying for more, in theory, makes perfect sense. I think the issue, though, is you have to start off from the beginning designing that game that way. You can't take an existing product and try to retrofit it to this approach.
You can't just slice a game in half.
Right.
You got to really build the model so the game is built that way.
That was tried in publishing about 10 or 15 years ago. I think it was 10 years ago. The Green Mile by Stephen King was sold chapter by chapter in supermarkets.
Yeah. And
it was something like $1 per chapter, and I think there were 30 chapters. So if you wanted to read the whole book, you spent $30. And it did okay, but consumers really didn't like it.
But it is a different generation, right? The Green Mile audience for Stephen King versus the hardcore gaming, it's a different generation, and they are used to microtransactions, whether it's cell phone ringtones or iTunes. So, it could change.